Hey guys, this is Steve Wallace, presenting my Module 3 Activity Fund Safeguards for EDL 854 Educational Finance. I use three sources, really more than that. The textbook School Money Matters, a handbook for principals, the Kansas State Accounting Handbook, and USD 233 Gardner Edgerton website, as well as I interviewed our business manager, payroll manager, and high school bookkeeper for a few of the questions. The things that we're going to be talking about is guidelines for spending school activity funds, characteristics of sound internal control system, three types of internal controls, basic general controls for school accounting systems, controls for cash receipts, and controls for cash disbursements. So the first one is guidelines for spending school activities, and how I did this is we were asked to compare and contrast our textbook to our state, district, and school guidelines. I'll reflect on that in just a second as far as our district and school. So the first thing for spending school activity funds is there was three parts to the textbook for safeguards: written procedures, sound business practices, and routine reviews. And our school kind of broke things down when it came to school activity funds into, or the state did, I'm sorry, into student and district funds. Student would be the student-led things, and district would be the district had control of that money. As far as specifics on procedures, sound business practices, I feel like both the state and the textbook were found those two things very important, obviously. But as far as my district and school went, I could not find anything written on the website, in the board policies, in our staff handbook, as far as what was the procedures. So if I was the principal, that would be something that I would want to get on paper and to our staff as soon as possible, so that they knew exactly what our procedures were when it came to handling school activity funds. Our next one was the characteristics of sound internal control system. The textbook talked about four parts of that: reasonableness, timeliness, reality, and commitment. So with reasonableness, did it make sense? Timeliness, obviously, done in a timely manner. Reality, could it be something that actually could get done? And commitment, was there sound commitment to following all the procedures, guidelines, and rules? The state has a lines of authority, starting with the school board, then superintendent, then district treasurer, on down to the principal. Principal sometimes has to delegate some things to other principals or other people in the office. And then finally the the representative of that specific activity. Both of them, obviously, organization was very important in the fact that there should be procedures, there should be timeliness, it should be done well and thoroughly. I would think that as a district, if I was the principal reflecting on this, I'd want to double check our protocol. I found nothing necessarily that was specific to timeliness, specific to whether it was reasonable, and obviously commitment is, I think, more of an action than something that's written. Three types of controls. The book was very specific with this: preventative, detective, and corrective. So preventative, how do you make sure the bookkeeping is correct? How do you make sure the money is where it is supposed to be? Detective, double checking, triple checking. And corrective, if there was a mistake, how do you fix it? With the state, it was specific that any funds and activity funds should be to the benefit of a student, and students, if they raise money, should get that benefit. It shouldn't be graduating students leaving money behind. There should be no benefit to a school employee or other persons. You can't give out a loan with activity funds. Things that were in common: approval, checks. So, you can't just go with a credit card and buy stuff out of the activity funds. There's a approval check that has to happen. For a sport like with me, I have to get it approved by the AD. The AD then passes on the principal. The principal signs off, and so on. So that's approval check. An audit. So both that would be detective work to make sure that there was no bookkeeping mistakes. The money was supposed to be where it is. And then segregation of duties, meaning certain people should have certain duties. For instance, the bookkeeper should not be the same person that makes the deposits. Our school does these things. As a new employee, I'm learning how our school does this. Every school is a little different when it comes to preventative, detective, and corrective work. I did not find anything about corrective work other than I'll go to down the line here. I'll talk about an instance that just happened this week, actually, that would be detective and probably corrective. So as a new employee coming in, if I was principal, I would want to make sure that new employees knew these procedures that we went through up front, so there's no questions asked. Basic general controls for a school accounting system. There was 3 parts according to the textbook: environment, controls, and limit access. The state talked about having written procedures for your accounting, and also organized documents, forms, and bookwork, meaning everything should be numbered, pre-numbered. Everything should be in specific places and in certain people's hands. So again, a lot of this has to do with organization. That's the common denominator between the textbook and the state and district and school policies. This seems to be a strength of our school. They do, although there's nothing written that I can find, they do verbally tell us the importance of receipts, turning money in time, how to handle money. There's lots of paperwork that you have to do to either deposit or to purchase something. The limiting access, I think in every school district things are locked up pretty strongly, where only certain people have keys to where the money is and where the checks are and that type of thing. We've already talked about the controls that are in place. Controls for cash receipts. The textbook talked about preparing deposits, making deposits, and giving receipts. The state talked about having multiple people involved. So the person that takes money at an event should not also give the ticket. The person that counts the money should not be the person that deposited the money. So there's a lot of different people double and triple checking that the money is correct, and then nothing's going on where something fell through the loop. Both talked about depositing money often, not having money on hand, and then again, organization, pre-number forms are very important. The current school I'm at relies heavily on the bookkeeper as far as money goes and all the forms. I don't see a lot of other people dealing with the money. It's really on her shoulders. It might be wise to have another person double check, just because sometimes mistakes are made, especially in a 6A school where you're dealing with 1,700 students and over 100 staff members. So I can imagine that bookkeeper feels overwhelmed at times. And lastly, controls for cash disbursements. The textbook talked about issuing checks, issuing purchase orders, and true balance. Talked about the importance when talking about checks and purchase orders, again, of organizations, keeping track of pre-numbered type of bookwork. KSD talked about approval. We already talked about there's a approval chain that needs to happen before a check is issued or a purchase is made. And then true balance. The textbook talked about knowing really how much money the school had, because when it comes to finances, there's money coming in and out. You want to double check what the school finances show as to what the bank account shows. And then the bookkeeper doing monthly financial statements was a state of Kansas important thing. Organization, again, another common denominator, and then checking on accounting. So for instance, on this, our bookkeeper quarterly has each activity double check their account. So this week I had to go in and look at our specific boys basketball account and make sure that the money coming in, money going out was correct and there was no mistakes, and then I had to sign off on that. So that's just one of those preventive measures. If there was something wrong, obviously that would be a corrective measure, and I believe the bookkeeper is in charge of the corrective measures. So again, that bookkeeper is definitely an important person in our school and probably needs a little help based on what I've read so far about finance. So that's my compare and contrast of the textbook. This is looking at our state, school, and district. One common denominator is organization is very, very important when it comes to paperwork, when it comes to handling money. One thing that I think is very important for our district to look at is having some written protocols that you go over with the staff that are easily accessible. So if there is any questions, people can find those answers easily. Thanks for listening to my presentation. See you soon.